with the meeting tonight. We've got a lot to get through, so I'm not going to hold up the discussion. But let's go ahead and get this meeting started. Debbie, can you do the roll call, please? Here. Yes. All right, so I'm not going to hold up the discussion. Let's go ahead and start. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic one nation. Just want to make note that I screwed up the pledge. I was on the wrong line. With that, I'm going to turn everything over to Tim. Tim, take it away. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be short and sweet so we can get right to the heart of this. But I did want to, for the public that's here tonight, maybe hasn't been following this, to kind of give you a brief update on why we're here and you know what the next steps are. So in September of 2022, the board started a goal setting process for the next 2 years. And through that process, we toured all the facilities and properties owned by the township. And one of the things that was, I think, quickly identified by the board in those tours is that the facilities that we've had since roughly 1990, we've outgrown because of the population growth we've had in the community, plus just the age of the facility as well. So as they started talking about their goals for the next 2 years, the number one goal was to strengthen public safety in this community. Very high goal. So now that's what you call cutting somebody off, right? Time's up. There you go. Time's up. So what they did is went through a series of goals and objectives to meet that strengthening public safety. And one of those was, it's just not one, so I'll talk loud. So one of those was to add within the next year to our police force, to add 2 full-time officers and 1 part-time officer to what we currently have. And the need was proven by Chief Broxter at the time because of Amelia coming online into the township, plus the general growth of the township. We had not increased our full-time force in a long time. So that was number one. Number 2 was what can we do to improve the facilities that we have in our community, particularly for police and fire. What we found, and Secretary Carroll's going to talk about that tonight, is in the police department, they were on top of each other. There was very little space. The facilities themselves were fairly run down because we hadn't done the renovation in a long period of time. So there were space needs, there were storage needs, and again, we'll all cover those tonight. And then also in the fire department, a number of significant needs we have. That department, the original building was built in the 60s, Chief, right? 64, and all volunteer department. And so essentially they've made do over all these years with that, trying to make it work, but it really is, it's not sufficient for what we need today. And so through all that investigation, the next step for the board as part of this goals and objective was to solicit an architect engineer to come in and look at our facilities, assess those, and then try to figure out what next steps potentially would be for the township long term. We went through a procurement process, and we had a number of very qualified architect engineering firms that proposed. We set up a steering committee, and the steering committee is here tonight, with the exception of Mr. Palkey. Bob Palkey is also in that committee. And I think it would be helpful if everybody can introduce himself just for the camera's purposes, and for those that are here tonight. It's on the steering committee. Essentially, it was department heads, and it was 3 residents from the community. And then Mr. Kelly, Trustee Carol Kelly, chaired that group. This group interviewed the top candidates after we culled through all those and had interviews with them and talked to them, and ultimately made a recommendation to hire Brent Carroll, who's located here in Cincinnati. They had a vast amount of experience, particularly working in public safety and in public facilities. We really like that. So at this point, the steering committee has gone through many iterations of this with Brent Carroll to try to figure out what may be some best approaches. Tonight, what we're going to do is go through the analysis they have of our existing facilities, where our needs are, what the process they utilize, and then ultimately what the potential options may be. They can be range from expansion of the existing facility to brand new facility. So again, we'll go through that tonight. And one warning as we get into this, if you've been to the grocery store lately, I thought this was going to be X dollars based on my experience doing this for a long period of time. And it turns out that the inflation that we've been suffering the last 3 or 4 years has been significant in building costs. I guess it's probably even worse. But when you see those numbers, they're fairly big numbers compared to what they were in 1990 when we built the facility the first time. And that's because of inflation and the size that we now accommodate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Chambers, thanks to Carol. But before I do that, if everybody here at the table, again, for the folks that are at home, can just introduce themselves, that it's on the steering committee. My job.
Yeah, I'm Jonathan Wood. I'm a Township resident, and I'm also an architect.
All right, police chief.
Eddie McCarthy, development planning. Nick Kelly, Township trustee.
Alan Freeman, trustee.
Ken Douglas, trustee.
Debbie Schreier as well, sir.
John Kohler, Township director.
Jim Watkins, assistant fire chief. Mike Anderson, deputy fire chief. Fire chief. And Mr. Curry, electric and volunteer. I got the cameraman, microphone. Well, as he's getting the microphone fixed, I'll go ahead and introduce our team. Our line is Monica Summer. She is the executive vice president and our public administration architect. With us as well as Jonathan Chesser. He is a assistant project manager in our public safety projects. On the back of the room that's joining us tonight in spectator seating is Ben Brandstetter, our CEO, and Joe Dillon, engineer, civil engineer in our Cincinnati office. They're here with us tonight. They've assisted in the site concept design and looking at various things. And my name is Eric Chambers. I'm the vice president of the firm and the public safety architect. I'm very versed in public safety. And so as I go through the presentation tonight, I wanted to start before we just jump into concepts and ideas, is kind of walk you through the process of where we've been. As Tim mentioned, we were selected in July of 2023, and we began a long process of analyzing and going through the existing facilities, talking with the committee as well as the staff of each department. We did tours, building tours of local facilities that are recently constructed in the area, different communities, which we'll show you some examples of those tonight. And then we also, besides analyzing the building, we also did staff interviews specifically with each department and actually interviewed every fire department, every police officer. We interviewed the service director and some of his team. Even though that was a little bit outside of the scope, the fact that they're on in the same facility, on the same property as the other facilities, we felt it important to include them, at least from a planning standpoint, to understand what their needs were and how do we look to those in the future as well as we're looking at improvements for all departments on the site. So here's kind of our process. We have a 4-step process when we do a planning study like your community has embarked on. Really, those 4 processes is the evaluation phase, where we do preliminary review. We talk about site analysis, programming. Programming is what do you need that you either don't have currently or that you may have that need to expand. And then we talk about staff priorities, and we'll get into some of those here in a second. And then we tour the existing facilities. So we went through and analyzed the existing facility in every department, talked with everybody to understand what they deal with on a daily basis from a service delivery. Because at the end of the day, it's more than just sticks and bricks. What we're trying to do is bring innovation and be able to heighten the service delivery that your community can provide to its citizens. So whether that be police, whether that be fire, whether that be administration, whether that be the service department, we want to make sure that what we're bringing is not going to hinder your service delivery at the end of the day. The second phase is what we call the engage phase. That's really where we start diving into a lot of the details of the existing building, talking with staff. We met and, as I mentioned, interviewed every department. and every person in those departments. We evaluated the functionality of each space and discussed spaces that they currently don't have that they would need to fulfill their current job duties. And then also thinking about what is in the future. What are things you're seeing in your community from a development standpoint, from a growth standpoint, and how do we make sure that your service delivery can take care of those as the community continues to grow? We also look at the code compliance. Does the building meet the current building codes? ADA accessibility for handicap or accessible people. And then also look at other growth expectations for the community as far as development, location, where's the population moving to, those type of things so that we have a good understanding. The next phase is the envision phase. That's where we start taking all the information, all the analysis that we've gathered, and we start putting concepts, pen to paper, start coming up with concepts, and we start looking at where can this building go? What happens to the existing building? Can we renovate it? Can we build on the existing site? How big does the building need to be? Is there other properties that we can potentially locate that bring better service to the community and also provide better building for the functions that are needed? We also look at specifically in public safety, we need to look at response times. If you talk about moving a fire department, you have to understand how does that affect their service delivery, which is response times to your community. How do they get within 4 minutes in certain areas or 8 minutes in certain areas, which are national standards? Obviously, with being a rural community, you have a lot of access needs that have to be addressed with roads and those type of things. So we also have to study those criteria within our review. And now we're at the point where we call the execute stage. It's where we bring all the findings to the community, to the trustees, with the committee, and we present what our findings are, our recommendations, and what this looks like moving forward so that you can make educated decisions as a community and as the leadership of the community to be able to make decisions to move forward. What does this look like moving forward? And so we're going to start to go through those various things tonight. If you have questions, Tim, I would recommend we wait maybe to the end so that we can keep it on a good pace. So go ahead. So the first thing we did is looking at the existing facilities, and I'm not going to go through every dot and tittle of building, but I do want to kind of highlight some specific areas. First, I'm going to let Monica kind of speak to the administration areas since that's her expertise.
Good evening. So the focus of my work on this project was focusing on the administrative part of the building and the project, whereas Eric and Jonathan focused on the public safety aspects. So the first part of our work was to analyze the work areas that staff are in, evaluate the service delivery to the citizens, look at the physical building and talk to the staff about any, the good and the bad and ugly of their work environment right now. The main goal is to have staff be in a safe space that they can provide good service. And when we're in the service delivery business model, and you have constituents coming in the building, you want to make sure that they're taken care of. So the images behind me, I have a print of it here so I don't have to turn around. One of the first things that we looked at was the entrance. When you come in, now you get into the vestibule, you have to push the button, wait for someone, and then the inner doors open. And that's really how you've had to address safety. Since 9/11, which has been quite a number of years now, that really changed the way we design public buildings. So they are no longer just for free access where anyone can just come and go as they please. And that's for the safety of other citizens in the building and of course, the workers in the building. So with that, we have a clash right now between the service delivery and the safety. The way the building is designed currently was great in the 90s, but today the way we deliver service is a little bit different. Interestingly enough, if you think about it, public entities or government is doing today the same things they've always done. You still have the same administrative function as you had 30 years ago and beyond. There are development needs, there are finance needs, there are service delivery needs with protecting the public. It's just that we do it differently, and the public interfaces with these buildings differently. So the question is, anytime we're dealing with public administration, is how do we have you remain accessible to the public, but safe? And currently, the way we keep people safe is we just have the doors locked. And it's not very welcoming and open to citizens coming in the building. There is no one positioned in the front that can see really the front door or see when someone comes in. So you have to sort of stand there and wait, push the bell and that kind of thing. And you all know that. So that's one of the things that we really address right away with our work. Spaces are need to be refreshed. The building is nicely painted. The flooring looks nice. It's clean. It's well kept. But that doesn't take away the fact that it just has a very dated look. Some people might not care about that. They think, well, it looks good. Why bother it? The concrete block interior walls make it very difficult for any rearranging of spaces to be done. You know, a more modern way of construction is we use steel columns, and then all the walls on the interior are movable. You can tear them down, relocate them, move them as times change. So we're in a situation with this building where that's very hard to do just because the construction was so durable. So that's an issue that we heard from staff on. We have the large corridor, the big corridor that runs down the building, and that just is space that's not well used. So we have people on one side of that corridor wall that are in very tight, small offices that lack privacy, and it's hard for them to do their work without being interrupted. And then we have all the space dedicated to a corridor that we see could be repurposed in some way. The public meeting space, you know, you've pretty much got the one room in the back. The size of it is fair, it's okay. The orientation could be better. Now we have all kinds of modern technology that makes meeting rooms work a little better than that. Obviously, with the building of this age, we're going to have just a decline in things like lighting, mechanical systems, failing finishes, and that's normal, just life expectancy of the building. And we've addressed that in some of our reporting. Space adjacency. So we have this, the upper middle picture. When you first walk in the building, there's this very nice window that's now covered up and has pamphlets in front of it. And the room behind it used to serve a purpose. That purpose is no longer needed, and it's now become a conference room. I've had meetings in that conference room. It's very nice. However, that space could be utilized better for something else. It's sort of in a makeshift situation. We have lobby space that's pictured just below that really doesn't function well. Again, we have a window. There's no one that sits in the office behind that window, so that room just becomes storage. So we've witnessed this, just these rooms that really have lacked purpose. And then we have office spaces like your finance staff. You've got 2.5 people in one room, and they really need privacy to do their job. They might be working on some, finance information, and someone is just having a conversation with the printer, and it's very, very distracting. And they're working on information that they need privacy and confidentiality with. Even just a location of like Eddie and Tim's office are just front and center, and there is no ability for them to have private conversations necessarily, or if someone's waiting in the lobby for them, they have no way to get out or get away or join them in a meeting room. So we just have space that is underutilized, and its purpose has just been outgrown. So later, a little bit later in the presentation, we're going to share the types of spaces that we feel would be advantageous for you to consider. But this is just a little bit of a download or a reporting on some of our obvious findings in the building for the administration area.
We'll look at the fire department and some of the findings from the tour and review of the existing conditions. What you'll see on the screen on the far left-hand picture is what we call turnout gear. That's the gear that the firemen use when they go to a fire. That gear is being stored due to lack of space in the apparatus bays. The National Fire Protection Agency, as well as the International Fire Chiefs Association, recommends that gear be stored in a separate room with its own ventilation away from where the trucks exhaust to keep the gear intact for a longer period of time, but also to keep the firefighters safe from having all the contaminants and all of that they have to deal with on a daily basis from off-gassing and those things. There's also a lot of storage that has to happen within the apparatus bays just from a lack of storage in room. Firefighters have a lot of gear, they have a lot of equipment, a lot of things that they have to have in order to do the job and service the public and the various tasks that they have to do. So a lot of that stuff is being stored in areas that they really need more room to be able to adequately store it, keep it safe, keep it protected, and those things. You also see the center picture there shows an example of the vehicles, the apparatus with the doors open. You may say, well, that's like my car garage at home. If I have two cars in there, we're gonna, the doors are gonna come close. Well, again, with the typical best practices and standards, there needs to be adequate distance between the vehicles for the firefighters to be able to move around the vehicles, especially in the case of an emergency. If they're trying to load, get things closed up, get things loaded, they're not bumping into each other, bumping doors, knocking apparatus and those type of things. And so those clearances that are recommended are not able to be met just for the sheer fact that there's not enough room in the current apparatus space. You can also see in the picture on the far right, we have a lot of storage that's being stored in a mechanical room that is not really that accessible, but it's also it's creating issues with maintenance because every time they have to service the equipment, they have to move everything out of the way to get to that equipment, which is not good. Moving into some of the living areas, some of the issues, the bunk rooms where the firefighters sleep when they're on duty. Currently, what kind of the industry standard was 20 years ago is everybody slept in one big area and you just kind of had a common bunk room, and that's just the way it was. Now, with the advent of CPAP machines, the sleep deprivation issues that many people have in the public, not just firefighters, those things, along with since COVID, it's also become a big issue where the bunk rooms are actually needing to be separated. You can see they've installed some walls that kind of give some privacy, but they're not fully contained, fully single rooms, just because of the sheer fact of the way the building's made and HVAC and all of those things. They can't separate them in complete rooms like that. So really best practices would be they would have individual bunk rooms that would be shared by each shift, but they would have their own space to go into to sleep when they're on duty. You can see again some of the storage needs there in the center picture, and then on the far right is a picture from one of the restrooms for the officers to use. You can see that there's really very little space between the toilet partition and the wall. That doesn't meet current building standards, but it's also very difficult for the firemen to use that when there's multiple people on shift. Some of the other issues with that are there's very little gender accommodations. They've done their best that they can do with the space they have to try to accommodate that, but with the female firefighting growing more and more females coming on duty, it makes it more difficult when you have both sexes there to be able to separate, to be able to do their typical daily living within those spaces. Again, this is the police department. Just to talk a little bit about the police. One of the big issues with the police department that we heard over and over in almost every conversation
that we had with the officers and even with the fire department and even with administration staff was the wayfinding. Someone coming to see the police department or meet with an officer, they have difficulty finding the police department, even though it's in the back of the building. Because it is in the back of the building, it's hard to find. And then when you do find it, it's difficult because the lobby space that you can see in that top left picture is very awkward. It's a triangular shape. It's very small. So if you have one or two people that come in there, if you have a victim or someone coming in to receive a record, they're both in the same lobby area. And oftentimes, especially a victim who's coming to give a report, doesn't want to be giving their information out in the middle of the lobby with somebody else standing there. Obviously, there's privacy things and other things that are needed. So that makes it very challenging. The center picture is some of the storage issues. We're storing a bunch of the files and other equipment that police need on a daily basis in the main corridors of the space. Those really need to be in their own lockable kind of storage rooms. And then the picture on the far right is the patrol area. Patrol area is really, I would call it their meeting area because it's really the only space they have. The officers go in there to do reports, to talk and those things, but if they have someone in the public, they have to bring them into the squad room in order to take a report and talk with them, which puts the public right in the middle of their workspace, which makes it very difficult for private conversations. If the investigators are doing something, it's not an ideal condition with respect to best practices in law enforcement and how areas are to be segregated and privatized. You can see there on the top left picture, the interview room. The interview room is a decent size, but it's very limited. If they have multiple suspects or if they have multiple victims that come in for a crime, they only have one room that they can put them and they're ending up putting somebody in or holding them in an office or in a storage room in order for them to have adequate space to handle the people there at one time. So having multiple interview rooms is important, but also having different types of interview rooms. Not everybody that comes in is a suspect or a hardened criminal. They don't need to be in a hard interview room. Having soft interview rooms for a child or for a mother who's been victimized, those are important spaces to have when someone's coming to the police department. The picture in the center, again, similar to the fire department, they have very limited accommodations for showers and restrooms for both sexes. Actually, some of the showers are being used for lockers because they don't have enough locker space. And so they're making do with the space they have, but it's not adequate for the size of the department and for future growth. And then one of the other big concerns, as Monica mentioned, is safety and security. With this being a police department, currently the public has access all the way around the building, even to where the police park. In public safety, really the police staff need to have a private, secure area where they park so that the public don't have access to that area from a safety standpoint, but also from litigation and other things that can happen. They really need to have that security and that privacy for their vehicles, for their staff to come in and out of the facility throughout the day in the evenings. Again, we did look at the service department, and I will just mention some of the findings there. Again, they weren't necessarily included in the scope, but as we recommended to the committee when we started, with them being a part of the facility, being on the property, we needed to at least look at them and think long term about how they might be affected by whatever we do. So one of the things we did was, again, looked at the buildings, and you can see some of the images there. The service department has a lot of equipment. A lot of the equipment that they have is stored outside. Unfortunately, when you think about how you're budgeting for maintenance and things over time, equipment, the more that they can store inside of a building, the better long-term investment that is, from the fact that they can keep things out of the weather, keep things serviced, keep things from being rained on and snowed on and iced on and all those things that they have to deal with, especially when they need to get out and do something. Then they have to take care of dealing with whatever might be on top of that from snow or ice standpoint. You can see some of the items that are stored outside there, just a small snippet. In the other two pictures, you can see some of really just the longevity of the building, and over time, it's just beginning to wear. You can see there's some cracking occurring in the block and some other things that they've repaired. So long term, those are just things that need to be addressed and taken care of. Some of the other things you can see in some of the buildings, they maximize every inch of those storage buildings that they have. If you can look at those first two pictures on the left, they have every piece of equipment as close and connected to each other as they can possibly get to get it all inside, to protect it, take care of it. But that makes it difficult when it's time to get a snowplow out and they need to get things ready to go out to plow snow, do ice removal, salt of the roads, or if they're just doing general maintenance because they have to maneuver vehicles, they have to maneuver equipment around in order to get and service that equipment. So they're utilizing the space tremendously, but it's just not enough for what they do on a daily basis. The two pictures on the right have to do with more of the staff and public space. The picture there in the kind of center right, that is really the office space for the staff, but it's also the lobby. So if somebody in the public is coming to the building to discuss something with the cemetery plot or something with parks or whatever it might be, that's where they're meeting right in the middle of their space, where their offices are. And then the picture to the right is they've converted a garage area to their break area, which they moved from another location because they needed space for storage. And so the space is there, they've got a break area, but it's not ideal and adequate for, again, these service departments doing things, especially overnight work that they have to do. They need a place to be able to go, to be able to get warm, have a cup of coffee, eat dinner, eat lunch, whatever it might be. And so for having that adequate location and place is important for them as well. Next, we're going to look at, as I mentioned, we went on tours of 9 different buildings around the greater Cincinnati area. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one, but I just want you to see some of the buildings, some of the images that you'll see. These are recent projects in these communities that have been built very similar to your facilities, administration, police, fire, and the modernization of these facilities and what they look like. So we started on 9/19 and we went through the end of September touring these facilities as a committee. And for not all of these facilities are ours. We did not do all of these. I don't think we went to any. We did. We went to other communities that did these just to see what other people have done, what they've looked at, what they've discussed. We met with the officials and the chiefs, the fire department, the police department, asked them what were good things, what were bad things, things you wouldn't do again, things you should have done that you didn't, so that we could have that information as we begin to plan and think about things moving forward. So we toured Fort Thomas. It was their existing city hall. They renovated and expanded their administration and their police and fire. We focused primarily on the administration area, probably more than the other two, because they spent most of their dollars in the admin area. So they made a lot nicer space for the public, for access, for better service delivery. You can see some of the spaces that they provided on the top right there. That's a community space. People can have impromptu meetings. They can meet with staff. They can come in there. Children actually come in there in the afternoons to do homework. So it's become a very very much of a community element for the community. Some of the other space there, the public meeting room that they have for council set up there as well. We then toured Liberty Township, which is a new fire station number 12. So you can see this fire station. Again, just some of the modern facilities. You can see the conference room there in the center. You can see the gear storage up on the top right. And that separated room with its own lockers, and ability to ventilate and to have those kept out of the apparatus bay. You can see the kitchen and living areas there on the bottom left. And then the apparatus bay is much larger space for all of the vehicles, space to be able to maneuver around the vehicles and load them. And height, enough height in there to be able to maintenance and load the vehicles as well. The next facility was Westchester Fire Station. We went and looked at that as well. You can see there again, very similar with a nice lobby space, conference room, community room. They actually allow the community to come into that room and use that room for meetings, Boy Scouts, whatever community group might want to use it for. But then they also do all of the training there. And then you can also see the bays as well there on the bottom right. The next one we toured was Blue Ash. We actually toured the City Hall Fire Department and then their new fire department. And this is just a compilation of some of the images. You can see the public access to the fire department on the upper left. Again, their large conference room that they had for training for the police department and for the admin. They're on the upper right. The bottom left is their council room. And then the bottom right there is the training room with the new fire department. Again, community room that the community can come in and utilize for meetings and such. Next facility was the Sharonville Police Department. This was a new police department for Sharonville. Again, you can see the outside entrance for the public, direct access in. The upper right picture there is the lobby for the public as they come in. There's actually a window for the police department and a window for the mayor's court because they have mayor's court in their building. You can see the bottom pictures there, the security in the center picture of the fence that goes around the property. That's for the police park and the staff park on the backside of the building. And then you can see the large conference room, again, another community room on the first floor that the community has access to utilize for public meetings or meeting with an officer and such. Okay. So the next item, and I'm just gonna put this up there. We talked at our kickoff meeting about what does project success look like? What is the goals and objectives of the committee, the township, and what's the vision? What is our long-term vision and what we're looking for? And I've just kind of compiled the comments. There was a lot of similar comments throughout. Okay, so you can see success there, some various comments I have there for success. Some of the, inviting the public, better service delivery, better space, more storage, vision, wanted to make it operationally friendly, become a vision or a identifying community icon to be able to really give the community an identity, make it accessible, make it future-proof so that you can grow over time and this building becomes a 50 to 100-year building, not a 20-year building, and then you have to think about doing this again. How do we modernize? How does the modernization of the building and technology help us bring better service to the community? And then some of the goals and the objectives of the committee were to bring cost-effective solutions, broaden the township service delivery, enhance recruiting and retention. That's a big deal for fire and police. Maybe not so much for administration, but for police and fire. The retention and recruiting is very difficult. It's very hard for police to get officers. A lot of them are retiring and it's hard to get new ones to come in. Same with the fire service. So the building can serve as an element for recruiting and retention. Officers feel like they've got a good space to come and work. They want to stay and they feel like they're being taken care of by the community. And again, we also wanted to make sure that we validated this with data, which is part of what we're showing you here tonight. Next up is the building program. I'm going to let Monica go over the administration, and then I'll talk about police.
Give Eric a minute to catch his breath. Currently, the administration portion of the building is about 2,600 square feet. And so we're proposing that jump up to 7,600 square feet. This is sort of a high level summary of those spaces. We've got a reception area or a lobby area we're calling it to be 1,455 square feet. And that would handle a security component, have a lot of daylighting in it, have good visual cues to where someone can greet them and appropriately distribute them in the building. We have a trustee/community room at just over 2,000 square feet, similar to your meeting room now, but larger, appointed with more technology, arranged differently to accommodate a more flexible public meeting space. The planning, zoning, and community development, we would create that as a separate department. So that staff can do their work and have meetings appropriately, have the storage that they need for all the data that they collect, and that's a little over 1,500 square feet. The administrative space we're estimating should be a little over 1,300 square feet with appropriate office space, but also storage and meeting space to meet with citizens also within their area. Miscellaneous support really is record storage, janitor's closet, supply storage, just the basics that go with any type of office space. So pretty tidy building program there for the administrative needs.
Excuse me, is that the current, or is that what you projected?
This is what we're proposing, sir.
You have to know what the current is when you did that.
Yes, it's a little over 2,500 square feet.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, for the fire department, currently they're about eight, including, if you include days, about 8,000 square feet. We're recommending, that growing to little over 11,600 square feet. What that would consist of is a small reception area. That's not the main lobby of the building. That's really the reception area, where off of the main lobby that the fire department offices for administration, and that would be for public that are coming in to meet with the chief or fire prevention to get a permit or what have you. Fire administration, a little over 2,000 square feet for the various offices, storage, meeting room, a plan room to be able to review. Your current fire department does a lot of fire prevention and a lot of plan reviews for development around the community. So they need a place where they can meet with developers, contractors, public, to review drawings and be able to have those meetings. And then again, the support space would be your apparatus bays, your gear storage, your other equipment storage that would be needed, a little over 2,000. And then the apparatus bays there is a little over 7,500. That's basically multiple bays that are drive-through, meeting all the FDA standards, along with some of the other equipment rooms, tool rooms, storage for hoses and gear and those type of things that go with that. The building support you see there, that would be all of your kind of mechanical, general storage, data room, electrical room, those type of things. That's looking at a little over 1,400 square feet to accommodate all of that equipment you need. One thing with the fire department and police department specifically, and with the admin being considered with that, that's needed in the public safety services is emergency generators, hardened spaces. They each, the fire and the police, have to have what they call a storm shelter in order to meet current codes, so that if they get hit, the community gets hit by a tornado, they have a place to be able to get out and be able to respond following the tornado. So the building code requires that they have those spaces within their departments. The police department currently is roughly about 5,000 square feet or so. We include all the space. We're looking there, increasing that to just under 20,000 square feet. There'll be a reception area, obviously for the public to come in and be able to meet with an officer, get records, those type of things. Training area, that would actually be shared with the fire department. And so there would be a training room, community room that people could come in and utilize. And then the police and fire can actually host trainings here, which give them the benefit of not having to pay for their officers to go out and be trained. They can have host trainings here. The records area for records, police records, a little over 1,000 square feet. Administrative offices for the chief, and other administration folks, storage, and those type of functions, a little over 1,100 square feet. Patrol for the officers that have workspace, file space, be able to meet with public, looking at 25, a little over 2,500 square feet there. Evidence, this is a big deal, obviously, for the police department. This is probably the biggest storage need that we've found. And probably every police department I go into and look at their existing facilities, this is the #1 space that every police department needs more of. Evidence retention is, depending on what it is, can be a lifetime. It can't be destroyed, it can't be gotten rid of. They have to maintain it, especially if it has DNA evidence or other things. So a lot of that stuff has to be stored, and it's never small. It's not just a little box. It's usually banker boxes or TVs or mattresses. I mean, you name it, it's got to be maintained. So the evidence storage, currently they have a closet of maybe about 10 by 10. We're recommending that evidence area for all of the long-term and short-term needs be increased to a little over 2,600 square feet. Police support, that would be all of your showers, restrooms, that type of space, a little under 7,800. Criminal investigations would be your detectives, their interview rooms, that's 1,900 square feet. And then what we call an in-custody area, which is for suspects that they bring in when they're doing paperwork before they take them to the jail or detention center, an area of about 280 square feet. That being so, they're gonna want to make sure that we segregate them from the rest of the area and they're not being mixed in with the staff and the public. So all of the program elements were developed through the interview process with all of the staff from each department. And that's how we came up with the needs and the sizing and all of that. So then from there, what we did is we started looking at, okay, now we're in the, really in the envision stage of what does this look like? Where do we go? How big is it? What's it going to cost? So one of the first things we did, is we talked about some potential property that we had available to us. We'll show you the overall map. So we talked about some property. Obviously, we have the existing administration building site there in the center. We have a couple other sites located kind of to the northeast at Maple Oak, Premier site, and the Emerson site. And then we also have a site kind of there on the south or east there, the Jenny Lynn site. So these were properties that the committee had given to us to look at as potential locations. And so the first thing we did was we looked at the response times, what that's going to do if we move police and fire specifically out to these areas and how that might look. So as we flip through, so you can kind of see the response times. The colors may be a little bit hard to see from where you're sitting, but basically what the fire, I guess the best practices is typically you want to be able to respond your first vehicle out in 4 minutes to a location, and your subsequent vehicles be arriving within 8 minutes. Obviously, that's not a hard and fast rule, but that's kind of the goals that everybody has to try to meet. So what we looked at is the 4 and 8 minute response. You can kind of see if you're at the current location where your response times are. The next location that we have here, if we went to Maple Oak, really any of those other 3 locations really kind of fall in the same metric here. So you can kind of see the response time is really kind of up a lot more towards your development area. Obviously, we're stretching down into some of the rural areas with the 4 minute, but we also cover a large area with the 8 minute as well. Chief, do you have any comments about this at all? You want to make public or anything before I just jump into something else?
I mean, I just think the area we're looking at is an area that's we've taken on from the village, and that's where our service delivery is currently. I think process. I was thinking out of chief Proxman, and I think for police and fire, we're spending a lot, using a lot of resources up in that area. That area. Okay, so
what we're gonna start to show you now is a lot of the concepts that the committee has reviewed with our team for these various site locations. And kind of the things that we've talked about and gone through as we've kind of worked through this over the last few months. So the first concept we looked at is what happens if we stay at the current location and we just build a new facility, combined facility on this camp, on that current campus? What does that look like? So taking all of those program elements that we shared with you a few minutes ago, that gave us a total size of what the building should look like. Now, for public safety, it's recommended that police and fire be a one-story building. It's not a must, but it's a highly recommended because of OSHA regulations and other things, the types of duty and that they do. It's recommended they be one story. If you have the property, that's the way to pursue it. Obviously, if you don't have the property and you go 2 stories, it's feasible, but it's not the recommended option. So we've looked at this kind of as a one-story facility. On the current property, you can see the expanded public parking to accommodate the public. On the lower kind of southern portion, we have the fire department and the township entry, administration entry to the right. So that the public, if they're coming in, can come to see the administration or to see the fire department, they would be located there. And then you can see we still maintain access to the back for the service department, but it would be from essentially the corner of the building around the facility to the other corner is going to be secure. So the public would have access directly in the front, and they could not have access behind the building. The service department would now be secure as well. All their equipment would be secure, as well as the police and fire staff and their equipment would all be behind that secure fence. And you can see we also have police and police and admin entry on the right as well. So if you're coming to see the police, you would have a direct location from the parking lot to come right in and meet with the police departments. Again, we're thinking about segregation and security for the various departments. If you're coming to see the police, you don't necessarily want to be intermingling in their lobby with people that are here to see Tim or his folks about planning and development. It's a different clientele. We need to be able to separate. You can see we do have some expansion for the service department on the back where there is a future building, some additional grounds and layout space that they would have for potential future growth. So, big problem with the building on the existing campus, a brand new building, was the township during that process, because there's really no place on the current site to leave you, and it's hard to phase that existing building to remain in place while we build a new. So we looked at what happens if we potentially moved police and fire out to Maple and Oak, and we looked at renovating the existing facility on the current campus into just the administration and service department. So you can see the existing building, parking lot, expanded on the bottom for the public. We've created taking the old fire bays and the admin space, the police space, and expanding that to allow for the service department to have some additional space for equipment and staff. They actually have their own staff areas and maintain all their equipment in the back. And again, we would still have a secure lot for the service department and the administration staff to have a place from a security standpoint, and the public would have access directly from the front of the building. So thinking about moving police and fire off campus, looking at potential idea at Maple and Oak for the combined police fire. Again, a one-story building, having access for the public off of Oak and Maple. Fire would have access out to 125, and then also on the Maple and Oak for response. So it gives them 2 ways off of campus. They can also return from either direction. And then we also have a secure entry up on the very top coming off of Oak, coming to the back of the spot for the police and the fire staff to have access and security as well. You can see we planned some additional future storage buildings that would be needed for potential evidence vehicles and other things that the police may need. And we have some additional staff parking area for fire to also have a storage building in the future as well. So after this was kind of our first pass at some of the ideas that we had come up with, and we discussed with the committee, like, you know, how is this proceed? What's your thoughts? Where do we go? Do we want to maybe move in a different direction? And really the conversation started to spark really about where's future development going? Where's the majority of the citizens in the community going to need access to these facilities located? And then how is this going to improve our service delivery? And so through that discussion, it really became, it would really make the most sense potentially to, could we move the entire campus out to this site, or one of the other potential sites in this general area, to improve our service delivery for all services, and then put us right in the middle of a large portion of the development. So this is looking at Maple and Oak, potentially going to everyone moving out to this campus. In this scenario, because of the footprint, we actually looked at a potential 2-story for the fire department, leaving the police and the admin on 1-story concept. Very similar kind of layout as what you saw on the previous slide. But really the main difference is the admin has moved out with police and fire on this location. Again, adequate service or public entry and space for the police and the fire. And then we looked at potential some future development that's been talked about. What happens if we kind of located across the street? Since there's a larger portion of property, what would that do? Really just was more of an exercise to see how much land would it use, what could it potentially look like. And then we also looked at the next site, which is the Premier site, also known as Pondview, which is the current building that's kind of been sitting there vacant for a couple of years. What would happen if we utilize that site? Again, just kind of seeing how that might lay out and how that might look with a larger property. Again, utilizing the same footprint, utilizing the same kind of parameters that we use elsewhere. And I think kind of as we came to a conclusion that through these concepts, I think kind of I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think kind of the consensus was the Maple and Oak property was probably, as far as service delivery, made the most sense to be able to put everybody on one campus and have the best bang for the dollar as far as being able to provide service to the community. One thing that did come up that we talked about was then the service department. Okay, so what do we do with the existing campus? So obviously service is still located out here. So we looked at, well, we could obviously have some room for service to expand over time. We also looked at one of the things that came out of the discussion was the chief made a recommendation that we actually utilize the existing fire department bays that are there so that we could have a satellite station to serve some of the western portion of the community from this current location, and then turn the current admin and police department section over and maybe make that a community conference center, so that, you know, if someone's having a funeral, there's a potential for them to be able to have a reception, whatever, at the existing facility. There'd be a chance for conference rooms and other things that was brought up that may be a potential for that. It would be a good need, and it's right near the park, or the parks, I should say. So you'd have a lot of interaction there with the various ball fields and parks and stuff things for that as a potential use of the building long term. So I'm going to let Jonathan present just some basic floor plan concepts that we've come up with. These were just some basic ones we came up with in order to kind of create a footprint, in order to lay them out on the site plans that you saw. So he's gonna walk through those real quickly, and then we'll get into some of the last items of the presentation.
Okay, so as Eric said, I'm gonna just go through a few of the floor plans that we just initially come up with. So as Eric said, we also looked a lot at one story because that's nationally, that is what's recommended for public safety purposes. But as you may have seen on some of the sites, a expanded one story all across the entire combined facility could get a little tight in areas, especially when looking at areas for future growth on the same site. So we came to the committee and they asked if we could look at options, looking at a two-story as well as adding a basement that could also house future growth internally in the same building. So in this concept, we are looking at the same combined facility, all township services in the same building with a basement. So just a little, just run through, the pink area right here is where the township offices would be, main entries on either side for, fire, police, administration in the center. On your right, you have the fire base, fire offices, bunk rooms, storage, training tower, everything the fire department would need to adequately do their duties. And then to the left, you have more of the police programs, such as adequate storage space in the darker green portion to the north, adequate office space, workstations, renovated community center and training room in the center with the blue and like the neon green, with additional storage and support spaces around filling in the rest of the area. In your basement, we really put some more of the additional program spaces that fire and police would use together. So your training room, men and women's locker rooms, mechanical, electrical, storage space as well. And then also adding in space for future growth. Like Eric said, and as the committee discussed, a successful proposal or successful goal for this review of facilities would be to have space where we wouldn't have to come back and do this again in 10 years. So we have area where we can just expand within, not have to redo this. Similar plan, this one is a two-story concept. So now a lot of program has been shifted to the second floor. So your first floor has a lot of public spaces, such as the administration areas, the records office, planning and zoning, of course, your apparatus space for the fire department, and a lot of your patrol units for police would be on the first floor. Second floor would be more administration for police and fire, as well as support bases such as bunk rooms. And then also, we're not fully proposing a complete second story, but rather space over top of the first floor that could allow for even larger future expansion over time. And so theoretically, you could just build that in when the building is currently being built, so that way it's already enclosed, no water's getting in there, and you easily have plenty of space to continue. And then again, basement, pretty much the same as the before, with your locker rooms, mechanical spaces, but this time adding even more area for growth. So really in this plan, we are really giving you a lot of space for any kind of future development, whatever may come in the future. Then, as Eric mentioned, we also looked at what if we renovated the existing administration building, renovated for the township, as well as allow for more space for the service department. So really, this plan looks at how can we do this in a reasonable manner, not going in and tearing down every wall, but what's the most functional use of the space to add new walls that would allow for more offices, future growth, a larger community room, more conference spaces, things of that nature. And then, as Eric also mentioned, we just looking to the future, if all services were to move out to the Maple Oak site onto one property, as Chief said, there could possibly be a need for a satellite station at the existing facility. So just looking at how that might play into a possible future community center or more spaces for the service department.
So everybody's still with us, right? I know it's a lot of information.
Do you want to pause, maybe there's some questions that folks have, and we get into this? Yes, sir.
What is the projected lifespan for debt span of the existing, or the renovations or repairs or anything like that? We can't do the root problems, and other problems that would be, so what can we have done on the existing facilities, how much older we got?
We actually, in part of our cost, will show you the deferred maintenance that we, in our assessment, what that looks like. You're looking at probably close to 1.8 million in deferred maintenance that needs to be done. That's not doing anything for police and fire or admin. That's just deferred maintenance requirements, HVAC, electrical, fire protection, technology, structural repairs, roof, all of that type of finishes, just bringing the building currently up to a modernization.
We're talking about bones.
The current, yeah. I mean, the roof still has issues. The roof is still currently a problem. I know they've done some patch repair as needed, but it's still an issue. HVAC is probably, I'd be generous if I said it's past its expected life, and maybe some units that have been replaced to fix things. Fire protection is not great in these repairs. Plumbing, there's a lot of stuff.
One of the priorities, we get one thing done first, make it last. How long, once you do 1.8 things, let's try to get nothing. Some of them, you're building, but that's it.
Yeah.
Is there 20-year building, 10 years, what is that, we get done, 1.8 years?
I think my best guess would be 20 to 25 years if you brought everything up in line. But that doesn't address the needs of any of the departments. That would just be giving you an operational building.
Well, I understand that, they're going to do something else, we're going to be 1.8 million dollars. For the recreation center, whatever else.
Yes.
That's great. Conversation.
Yeah.
One of the other things, we mentioned this part. What proportion of the population of these Township lives on this side of the fire station compared to the portion that lives on the other side of the 1 because we're talking about from here to get to Maple Oak or the further building, there's 5 traffic lights. And you've got to get out on 225, which we can drop right over the rats. And then you have to go to the other traffic lights, you get up there, it's on 125, not very high. There's rumblings about the fancy things on the side of 125, which is going to take up space. And you go up there. Would it not be better to leave where it is, leave fire where it is, because we don't have to go through all the traffic, or we just gotta make this, turn ourselves into a lead.
I think that's one of the things that's going to start for where we get the sense of what the committee, can say about this. Absolutely. What kind of population discussion with projected food aids does the fire? you know, a new building. And what about new construction in the county and other places, where the new development doesn't take place? But that in fact, where a new facility would be placed. You know, we that, or if they not taking it as a word, that. I think. And very early stage, we're at the project. I mean, where it actually comes to. How do we know what that's going to be? All of it becomes an infrastructure, you know that. If you don't have a full on infrastructure, it's something that's populated during one function. We're talking about, you know, we're talking about new development that's going to drive population, and we're taking a big province. Amazing president. We only we can project. That's the thing that we for we said we should do that again. Let's finish up with some. You. I think wonderful.
What you told me, I didn't see the new police line out. What are we gonna do with that? Is that another supposed storage area? Whatever you want to call it, the big line out the back, you know, I didn't see that included in anything we started getting up and down, because the line that needed to be put on.
No, I don't think that's, I think that's, I don't have to be very popular. Right now, we're just looking at, this is just, I don't think we're actually being specific how all the actually there. For the next phase, but there's a lot of options there, it's still needed.
There's always been going to be this and fire substation that they live in town, we never have. We don't use that big funding, a lot of that can never happen.
I don't get on to the next.
Yeah. And fusion is a big problem.
So I'm going to go through scenarios of these costs. They're correlated to the concepts that we looked at. So I'll try to kind of give you that information. So the first question that came up was about what do we need to do to just improve the building or get it to last another 25 years. So we have that as a deferred maintenance. That option does not address any of the functional or operational needs that we've identified. It just addresses the needs of the building to make the bones and everything work that's currently there as it sits today, with basically the only other thing you get would be new finishes. So that's actually, I was a little bit more than I had that I mentioned. It's almost 1,150,000. So that's addressing HVAC, plumbing, fire protection, roof, HVAC, finishes, ADA accessibility, building code issues. So that's getting it just up to being current and where it should be today as it sits today. The renovation of the existing township building. So this was if we just renovated and moved police and fire out. That construction cost is about 7.5. That includes the money of the 1.9. That's in that number. It's not on top of that. So it's a little over 7.5 million. Soft costs, FF&E, that's your furniture, equipment, other things that a contractor's not going to actually put in the building. That'd be stuff that the community would put in there, or the township. And then the contingency, because we're at such an early infancy stage, that's covering any design decisions that are made throughout the course of the project. If this was the decision that went forward, how much, heavy money is set aside for decisions that are made, adjustments. Obviously, what you have to keep in mind with these costs is there is a lot of assumptions being made at this level. We have not sat down and put designs together. We have not designed mechanical systems, electrical systems. We're taking our historic data of projects of similar scale and scope and putting that information together to try to give you a ballpark to be able to utilize to plan moving forward. So there's really two ways to do a project that we always like to explain to people. This is one way in which you define your need, and then you put numbers to what that need is. The other one is you define the number you want to spend, and you do as much as you can for that amount. Okay, so we're doing, as a planning study, we're doing, here's the need, here's what you need, here's how much it's going to cost to fulfill all of those needs. And keep in mind, I'm not advocating for, one thing or another. One point to you as advice is to understand pricing and construction will not be going down. So if you push this off for 10 years, the costs are going to escalate. May not be as much as they have been over the last 4 years, but they're going to continue to go up. And the need doesn't go away. These needs are not with the police department or the fire department or even the administration. So the need's always going to be there, and it's just a matter of how fast can you address the need and how much are you willing to spend. So I'm going to give you the remaining costs as we continue forward. So total project, we like to give you the total project because a lot of people see construction. And then when they get done with construction, they realize all the other stuff they have to put in the building or all the costs that come with that. And they're like, oh, I didn't budget for that. So we like to give you a total budget, not just the construction cost. Escalation contingency right now, escalation and construction is sitting at about 6% annually. Now that fluctuates month to month, year to year, but we're sitting at about 6%. So on an annual basis, the longer you wait, you can anticipate at least a $478,000 increase every year. Ultimate building materials, there were some things on there you couldn't see because of the quality of the screen. There was some material bins and some other alternates that we had on the site plans. I'm just giving you numbers, so if you wanted to budget for those long term, you can kind of have some ideas of what that might look like. So those are what those numbers are. This one is if we turn this this existing property into a satellite fire and a community center. Again, it's broken down the same way. We're looking at about 7.675. Now, obviously, we don't have any programming of what the community center might be. So this number is probably 15 to 20% up or down, depending on what that program looks like. Same thing for escalation, 6% annually. So if we did a one-story, we talked, Jonathan kind of mentioned there was a one-story with a basement and then a two-story with a basement. So the new one-story at Maple and Oak would be construction costs of a little over 22.5. Contingency again, that's to cover any decisions and things that aren't known at this point. Total project, it's about $467 a square foot, which is what we're seeing right now in the construction market for public safety. The admin portion isn't really that big portion of that. It's really all the things that go with public safety that really drive that cost up. That's a probably moderate median range that we're seeing right now in the construction industry. You can see again the escalation factors and then some of the alternates of things that were there on the plan identified there at the bottom. This is the new one story with a basement is 24 over 24.2 square footage cost went down a little bit because the basement square footage cost isn't quite as drastic as the other level, but again, it's still added additional square footage, which we did accommodate, as Jonathan mentioned, some future space in that basement for expansion as well. And then the last one there is the two-story combined with the basement. That one's at 27, a little over 27.5. Again, the square footage went down a little bit per square foot. But again, there's a lot of future expansion that was built into that plan. So, there's growth already built into that and covered in those numbers. Really, question might come up, well, if we went to one of the other sites out that we looked at what those costs might look like. If we stayed here on the current facility and we built a new building, we would have to relocate police, fire, and admin during the construction. And basically, we ran some typical rental numbers. Obviously, hopefully the township would get better numbers, but you're looking at probably about $710,000 over an 18-month construction period. So that's not a small number to try to relocate. Future training center, again, that's That's a future development. If we went to the Emerson site, which is across the street from the Maple and Oak that we showed you, you can see some of the additional numbers there. Those are just some things that were on there, but acquisition of the property plus the development cost for that larger piece of property, we're going to be adding about another 2.6 million to that project. If we went to Pondview, where the premier site is, with that abandoned building it's sitting there, it's not been finished. Acquisition of the property. And again, we'd have to develop, that includes demolition of that existing building. That existing building is not conducive because it's been sitting there almost 3 years. Before. Plus the building wasn't designed for police and fire. So it would be nice to be able to say, yeah, we can go and reuse that, but realistically, it wouldn't be feasible. So you're looking at demolition costs plus the development of the property and the acquisition costs. It's another 4.4 million on top of the cost. We already should. So what are some of the next steps? So obviously, some of the things that the township would obviously, would have to have discussion, determine, hey, what is our best course of action? Is there an option we want to pursue? Is there, maybe we want to look at something else? If there's land acquisition necessary, then you obviously would have to pursue that land acquisition in order to make sure you can acquire the property for the project. Identify funding mechanisms, how would it be funded? Whether it be bonding, levies, we talked about a variety of things, grants, loans, whatever it may be, that would be available. Those things would have to be discussed and determined. Identify the delivery method, and we'll cover this in our final report, the pros and cons of each delivery method. Whether it be general construction, which is you design everything, put it out, bid it, and you get a number back from contractors and you go with the lowest bid. You get a construction manager who helps you through the design process to maintain cost. They should be getting you better numbers at bid day, and then they are at risk to make sure the project gets done on time and in budget. Or do you go to a design build type approach, or do you even look at a P3 type approach? So there's a variety of options that are out there to look at in a delivery method. And so we'll provide pros and cons and can discuss that with the committee moving forward if there's an option they would like to pursue to help them through that process. And then obviously, once you make that decision, you know how you're going to fund it, you know where it's going to go, you make the delivery method option that you want, then we begin the design process. And then that's where we get into all the details of what HVAC system we're using, what is it, all that kind of detailed stuff that we haven't gotten to because we're looking at it from a planning standpoint. So that concludes. Sorry, it's my fault. What does a design schedule look like? Design schedule, you're looking basically in about 15 to 16 months from the beginning of design to going out to bid. And construction for a project of this size, you're looking at no less than 18 months. So just from a timetable standpoint, everyone to understand, if you made a decision tonight, you're not going to start construction tomorrow. There's a lot of work that still has to go into this. So that concludes our presentation. So.
Very good. So does anybody from the committees that you guys want to add what we do that?
I'll be real brief. First off, I want to thank everybody who's a member of the committee for the volunteer time that they put into this. It's a fair amount of time. I really appreciate that. I thought the committee did an excellent job. It was well-rounded, a lot of different viewpoints with a lot of different angles as far as experience and background and folks that were on the committee. So I feel like that was great. I will say that I sort of approached it in a way that I was just trying to let everybody do their thing and try to come up with as many options as possible. So I don't really have a dog in the fight per se. I think the goal was the committee was to get information together, provide recommendations, and get them to the board, get them the two of you other guys. I will say that I'm sort of more of a pragmatic, not so much more of meat and potatoes. And I'll lay a couple things out on the table. We're not Blue Ash. We're not Westchester. We don't have those types of revenues. Everybody in this room knows that for sure. That is not who we are. And some of these pictures you see up on with a real nice white type of ceiling where it looks really pretty and bells and whistles, things like that. I don't really advocate for any of that. But if you go and anybody who tours our facilities, you go and you look at the police, you look at the fire, you look at the lack of sleeping quarters, the lack of space, the accommodations as far as restrooms and things for females and things like that. And moreover, you go and look at the police department, the lack of space for storage, interview spaces, things like that. It's just, there's no question that it's inadequate in many ways. And so my opinion is, of course, the goal is to get to the two other board members here, but I'm going to come up here and quickly throw this out, is that something I think needs to be worked out in order to create accommodations for our employees that are competitive. Because we're competing with other police, other fire departments in order to get folks in here. And if we don't have good facilities that are conducive to what people are looking for at this point, as far as a job as a police officer or a job as a firefighter, then we're going to, continue to fall behind in that regard too. So again, from a pragmatic perspective, I think it's essentially to do something. That's all I have. I don't have an opinion on what. That was the goal, to get this information, get it to the other two board members, get it to the board, sort of chew on this for a little bit and see what might be best. That's all I have.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, well, if that's the case, we're not having any further discussion here.
The original building is like, would we really can be all at the front and add a fire bay on the right hand side of the existing one? And then renovate, change some around in the inside so that the fire can move out where they're comfortable now. The police can move along where the current boardroom is, your property room is, and go around the end of the front. Well, that wouldn't cost $22 million. Probably wouldn't cost $8.
Actually, I don't know.
No, but I mean, instead of going to building a giant rehab, and come up with that.
I guess that question is leaving.
I'm an electrical contractor. I've grown up in construction. My father was a contractor. My grandfather was a plumber. Jonathan is an architect. So when Nick put the committee together, he brought in people that have been around this stuff. I've been in the trade my entire life. I'm going to back up what Brandstetter said with the hard walls inside, with concrete block walls. They're supporting the roof. And when you want to move a wall to make a room bigger, you now have to support the roof that wall used to support, but doesn't support anymore because the wall's gone. In a new building, it's a free span roof where it's outside wall to outside wall, and everything underneath is just tissue paper, if you will. And you tear a drywall wall down, you move a drywall wall over. And other than a few hard rooms for evidence or things like that, the armory, they're pretty movable and flexible. I've looked at that building over the course of the 9 months that we've been having these meetings. I've wandered through there. I've been through a number of other buildings. We service a half a dozen fire and police departments ourselves, our company does. And so I've seen them from that. I saw them through the flood of '97. I saw them through Hurricane Ike when the power went out and was out for some of them for days. So I know what it's been like. And the building they're operating in now is just not what, as a business owner, I wouldn't ask my employees to work in there. And I don't think I should be asking my public servants put up with what they put up with from some of the public there, because there are people that are very grateful for their services and there are people that are not. Okay, we know that. To do all that and then to work in a substandard situation on a continuing, ongoing basis with no relief in sight. And we know we're going to continue to have growth. All you've got to do is drive any direction and pick a farm field. I just moved out here 2 years ago from Anderson Township. I moved into Anderson Township, into the house I grew up in 1959. I just moved out here 2 years ago from that same house. Sherwood Forest was a farm that was one of the very first subdivisions in Anderson Township. Beachmont Avenue at that time was 2 lanes. And Anderson High School was at the old Kroger building and yada, yada, yada. We've got growth coming. We're not going to stop it. Union Township is filling up quickly, and they're just going to keep on coming our direction. So we can either get in front of this and have a building where it needs to be. We're already using Ohio Township out in Pisgah as a satellite firehouse to cover the far eastern end of the territory out there on a contract basis where we're sharing with Ohio Township. We've got this facility here, but there's a tremendous need, particularly east of here, that I can say that there's a lot of vacant land out there that's going to get filled in. And so if we don't buy the land or secure the land now,
I've been down here for 70 years. I know the township better than probably everybody in this. There's a big block of land left, and the ones that are left are Hillary, your days, all kind of, they're not, conducive to building large blocks for subdivision development. Okay, so I'd like to know where we have those identified when I break through. I go back to my, well, like this, where to.
Right, what happens if someone can take, if it's something we can take, needs help and they're. So we have to decide because of agreements with other parties. So while we may not have big lots, big areas for development, we still have to respond to areas that are. And that answers your question. Because we still have to respond to that call. So whether we may not have a huge level of development specifically in my neighborhood or your neighborhood, we still have to deal with that.
Mutual aid is in dire straits. Those are exceptional calls. Okay, right? How many mutual aid calls have we had in the last month?
I would say it's daily. Daily, yeah, we're receiving aid from our neighbors and providing.
From where? To who?
Some were going from Richmond, the road last night, from the road township, some were going with us today, Union Township, Anderson Township, Washington Town, we're on the river in Washington Township, that's where we want.
So we're proposing spending, 1.9, 23 number of because we have sort of on the community of our own, that's what I'm saying.
And but the point is, we're not proposing anything. We're just sort of. That's
So
all.
say we cover future growth. So yeah, that's all neighboring communities, all we're spending on the part that here, and our benefit, so other.
Welcome to the downside.
You sort of worked your way around the straw man argument. A lot of our facilities right now are, that's all I'm saying. So I don't really, again, I don't have a real strong opinion on how fancy we get with any of this stuff, but we have to do something. We don't have the space right now in our fire department, and we don't have the space right now in our police department. So I'm not gonna get into some arguments about, like, well, how do we service other teams, all that kind of stuff. I think that we just really need to kind of focus on what our needs are at the moment and realize that something, we're gonna have to do something. So that's why there's that plethora of different options.
It's over, I understand, it's an ugly situation, I'm not arguing about it. The other point I want to think is right home is nothing happens until we have some kind of idea how we're going to get the funds. Whether it's 1.9 million or 25 or 30 million or whatever. Nothing happens until we have some idea if we're even, any idea to the same fund.
That's exactly.
And the other question is not only the family, it's How will we do that? That has to be our next session. We said, so we're, I mean, you're on the same page. I know you're doing all, but the truth is, like, we're on the same page.
You work at one producing how you're gonna get it, we gotta be able to sell it to people. And how you gonna do that when you say, well, we're gonna move from here after there, Township, new people here, because we moved it, no. Not like it's what happened, well, there you go.
I don't think we're saying that we want to move out of this corner area. What we're trying to say is we need another station on the eastern side for the community. There will be some sort, I would say, in this general setting, whether it's on this campus or not, there will be something in this area to serve this side of the town. It has to be. There's enough people over here that it has to see, you don't want to shift responses. No, it's not about that. It's actually about better covering the area. It's kind of like that.
Pull it one way or pull it the other way. We don't want to do this.
We had a Walmart tip that we never used to do a fire station up there. But the day we were doing fire, we was across the other end, that was always the problem. So there we are, now that we've absorbed the media. We're going to put something like that in to physically serve that, tank. But the rest of it,
It very well needed this, but as Greg pointed out, we're already in the next wave of facilities now. So while we're having a discussion about the next wave of facilities, let's talk about how do we may not like that. So how do we respond to our needs in that part of the country? Is that part of the country? But it's a fact that, we can't ignore. And we have a responsibility because we go there to clear them out of the public. So that's really here itself, not actually. We're not saying tonight that we took a vote on the $27 million bill. I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Fine tuning those dollars, to get into something that's reasonable. And I don't see that. So many folks, with many folks, public companies.
the problem, it's the board was in the end.
So we'll throw something out about 11.
Would be funny, yes. You guys have anything else?
Well, I have a lot.
It's something that's going on.
We have enough time?
They can talk to that.
I've been through these presentations before. Thank
Have you?
Oh, absolutely. I was trustee 4 times, 5th time they decided to right hand one. And we built an awful lot during that time. It had facilities and so on and so forth, we went through it all. And funding. And in the process, I also helped build the jail for the county. The communication center for the county. Part of the hospital for the county. And just about anything else, because if you really want to get involved and you have people that know how to do it, you can do it. I think I signed contract, here we go, with Grand Center and Farrell. And they are or were a very good outfit. I even delivered the contract down there to be the deadline. And most of those were tied to funding. If the funding wasn't there, and the funding for the park, many of these things, the funding for the park came from offshore oil firms. We used Grand Center and Farrell because they had some magic that tied us to the federal government. I do not know what that was, but it did work. Now, well done. Yes, it was. But when we got to the building, we hired someone else. We hired Bill Peace, and he crawled through these buildings because he knew that we were not going to build this Taj Mahal. And he did the same thing for the hospital. He did the same thing for Fairmont County Courthouse. Because they couldn't tear down roads. And they put the elevator inside, the jail and everything else. That's what we did.
what we had to do, and that's what you're going to have to do, unless you get $25 million. And then you can do it.
Well, the good thing is that the grants are fair, the lottery ticket for it's on the way in.
No, no, I don't think so. And I went through their presentations and so on. And the first thing, when we use Grand Center and Carroll, they get a fee and so on. It was coming out of federal money. We didn't have the money. If the money wasn't there, we would not have used Grand Center and Carroll. I'm just telling you right now, that's the first thing. If you can guarantee that we can get $20 million, go for it. I don't agree with some of the ideas, but go for it. And we're stuck with the billion, we're stuck with the boundary, we're stuck with the other townships and so on. But we made it work. We don't care if we go to the fire on this side, and we don't care if the guys are on the other side. We gave all our old equipment to the MOP to bring it the same way. And there's no backward plan. That was what was our goal. And this place was built when Beck George came on. I was just asking, when did we do all this? Well, the 1956 pump was got on the drive, it's still where? Get it running. That was 1956. That's when we built the hall. And it was that one. And there's no power plant, nothing coming in. All we have is these people. I employ you to develop a property that's left up there. I'm trying to line up the purple or blue building up there with Sam. Please get Sam to do it. I've been in their Sam facilities and so on. Get him to take it over and change the zoning. If you don't want more people, make it more expensive. Don't put apartments in. And they're the ones that did talk about use. We kept track of use and so on. I mean, we did it all. And you can still do it. This is pie in the sky. If there's $25 million, you can discover oil on somebody's property, great. But I don't have it. And you don't have it, you're in 30 Township. Now, I saw this building, and I saw the same presentation with another competing company. And they built this school, and they built the Amelia School, all the rest of the schools. And they had a group just like this, but they also had state funding. And they came with the state funding, and pretty much we were almost all the same building, same design, and so on. They took a percentage, they had all the people and so on, but they had the state funding. There's no state funding. Somehow you're going to have to come with the funding. And we had the backdoor plant, although it was winding down, and we never got a big chunk except in 1956 at Homewood. I still want, and the firehouse and our building. And that was it. And we didn't get the nuclear plant. There's no more coming. And so you got to be realistic. All this is fine. But I've seen these presentations before. This building was built by another competitor to Grand Center and Carroll, and they came up with a package, and they had the different people that did all the specialties and so on, and they did the tours in all the different school districts, but they also had state funding. So if you went with them, you were in, you got the state funding, and that's why this building, so it's almost identical to the one up in Delia, the one over here, and the one over there, because it was the same set of plans and the same set of people. And I don't think Grand Center and Carroll had that input.
I don't think it's here.
Thank you.
Do you guys have anything on cash?
It's not.
Well, but to your point, that is going to be the main thrust from here on. How do we get any money? How do we get it from? And it's going to be updating how far we get. It's very correct. And we can say not ready to be the outcome yet, but we know we have what we have to.
I think it's, you know, time is everything. And everybody.
He's throwing stuff. It's supposed to be, he wants to get out of it.
I'm just, I mean, I know we have, this all has to start in here. But this is going to be a hard sell. A very difficult sell.
But it's certainly, it's got.
But I think we go from the top of the hall idea down to a little bit more acceptable way to get around this problem. Other than, however, many millions of dollars save that pretty good.
Perhaps, maybe very, I'm not, again, I'm not really, but I will say that, you know, the police department in our community is very broad. People, you go to door to door, and people love the police department. They're brave, they take care of business, they're the perfect balance of not being too intrusive, of being friendly and, you know, keeping everybody safe. So I don't know, I wouldn't underestimate the people's, and some of the numbers that we threw out in regards to like police, I think if the word start there or not. I mean, the amount that you pay out through the police service and your tax bill, and of course, that goes up and down based on the number of property, but it's not excessive. And if we were to add a kind of money for something like that, that could be somewhere to start, but you have to start somewhere. You got to kind of think.
I agree. I do, but let's get it off the top of the hall. Let's get it down.
Well, that's what we're going to start working toward. This is the first step. The goal of graduates that are girls' perspective is to provide us options from the bottom level to the sort of the top level. And then it's up to us as elected officials, residents, the way that we figure out what's the best for this.
I disagree with you, Dave, on one thing you said. I work with the chief hospital, the proximity of the subject of I'm saying that he hard ass police. Volunteers.
He hides it well.
He was like that. He's what he does.
You look so friendly.
It does, it makes you a great compliment.
But it was really sort of, if I may, we have.
You look down on Pond Run Road.
That's the other day, the first one out, they have this way to our landmark.
We made a point that we need, the previous meeting, that we need to move quickly. So we have to move this study in the next 12 months. And now you're talking about trying to raise another $7, $8, $9 million. See, that's even just to update the building, but I think we've got that. We really get it. This lady is going to be here, and this is going to be there, you have to be able to convince people. I know, I mean, yeah, we taxes, but if we can start with the fundamental things, like I said, add another note, then pay out the side where the cars are. So now you can put an extra line on it. Yeah, it's just, right, and then look at, you could fill the courtyard and the building over it goes to. That'd be a very nice too, I know. If you could do the line with the lines, it's all lines, so I think that's the next step, nothing really done. Right, I always said, you heard me say, nothing really done. It's fine.
My last question, friends, is with your these, scenarios, is there ever interest whether you put a second story on one part of the building? And it would support the second, so that you could maybe administration or just filing and on the second floor? On the existing building, yeah.
The current structure won't support it. We would have to take everything off. And basically put on a structure on the building for the roof. The roof is current. To create a foundation. Well, yeah, I mean, that's if we can get the foundation to handle it. But
That's
the
what
current,
yeah, that's okay.
if it's looked at, I think the big, I mean, anything we looked at, any scenario, we could spend twice as much doing that as. I would say one thing with respect to police and fire. The building that is currently sitting there is not designed to function as a police fire. Does it function currently? Yes. But not, if you go and the police department has to be hardened, there's a lot of security, a lot of things that has to be provided. Even if we renovate that building, we're not gonna achieve, we're gonna spend a lot of money to provide that. Because the structure that's there is not designed for police, a modern police. And to receive the accreditation and the things that they have to have. It would be difficult to have. It's not gonna be necessarily a cheaper fix. Same for the fire. We can add another bed, but that doesn't improve the living conditions that they're in, that they need. You're talking more and more expansion, and they've got components they have. The current building doesn't provide. Like they have wood ceilings. Were nice at the time when they were done, but that is not what you would have in a modern fire.
You have lighting, there's a piece in the back where the police entrance, there's a gap, you can fill that in, and so you can make that, part of the police area, you can make it fire area.
If you do anything, what you can go
There are some challenges to when you had a bag idea that did with the high tension lines running through your ditch. Only so far that we can come over out of that side of that building, so that kind of landlocks where we currently sit. When that police department was open in 1991, when they moved everybody, you have to understand they had 12 uniformed officers, the police chief and the secretary, and they were filling that space up pretty tightly pinned. Now, how many uniformed officers do you have in that building? 20. So their staff has got, they've always got bunk beds inside, bunk desks in there now. And the same with us, when our fire house, it was a volunteer fire department with nobody on station, a community building, a small township trustee hall, an office, some bathrooms. We've adapted those spaces to many changes. We didn't even have EMS services back then with that firehouse. So EMS was added, and we had to readapt spaces. We've over the years readapted space after space, taking spaces that have been readapted them again. And unfortunately, we just don't have any more space that we move into the future that attach residential guard services.
Anyway, my question is, we're talking about a grandiose building and accommodate. Right now, we're existing in the building ordinance. Why can't we build a new police and fire station on our same property? We've got lots of all built to use. We put the buildings there. Nobody would have to move out of where they're living right now. So the new police and fire station is taken care of and build, move them there, and then remodel the building that we have right now. What's wrong with that?
I think both of you guys should speak to that a little bit. Chief Roxman, as far as taking and just building more police facilities in the same location that we have now. And I think that would best service the residents that we have right now. That would be the best solution. And Chief, I think speaking to you guys are the best people to speak to this stuff.
Yeah, so the current, our current service demand is out Hamlet area, Sedona Ridge, Quail Creek. We've got that large Walmart and Kroger out there. So to get to any of those locations efficiently, where the majority of our service demand is, like it or not, it takes a while to come from Locust Corner. And so it's from an efficiency stance, it would be more prudent to build a police station out where the service demand is taking us.
Okay, then I would do that, move the police and fire out where you want it to be. And then leave the admin building where it is. That wouldn't hurt anybody.
I think to piggyback on Chief Brockton, that I think regardless of the scenario, we have to have, fire department has to have a presence in this vicinity. In addition to still addressing the needs in the other part of the community. I mean, even going back to the Kramer study we did a couple years ago, we looked at additional future station locations and growth. So I don't think we can. I can't accept addressing the future growth in the Amelia area and flipping the problem and neglecting the people here. So we still have to have that service maintenance in both areas. But I think even when we talked about it, we were very sharing spaces and trying to cut down to where our folks would share a lot of room instead of us needing a lot of room, PD needing a lot of room, and combining the things we could just to try to get that footprint smaller and price tag down and sharing. I think that's one of the unique things, and push back on the rest there. When we kind of originally talked about that, it was, you know, a lot of communities that doesn't work sharing. I think you know, positive to the situation we're in is we've been forced into sharing everything. So our relationship amongst police and fire is phenomenal. But we can coexist in a lot of those spaces. It probably doesn't work in a lot of places.
But you negotiated the local routes, city boards, the bathrooms. Is that right?
Yeah, all of that sharing is already shown in what we. The training room, the community room, restroom, the locker rooms. Workout in the fitness room. I mean, all of those things that they were willing to share has already been accomplished. In the program, we have not quote unquote designed. We've created concepts to be able to put things on, you know, and going back to the ballpark question, we can look at any site. The committee, when we talked about, the committee was apprehensive about taking the park. So we did look at the parks. So if they're giving direction, and that's what we want to look at, we'll go and look at it. But I think speaking to what the chiefs are saying, from a police and fire standpoint, we showed the concept. We moved the police and fire out from Maple Road, as Chief Washington was saying, being out in that service area, and showed renovating the current facility to end. But again, we're going to be, we can look at it again, like I said, trustees can come to us and say, we are only going to spend 10 million. That's all that this community can afford to spend, and the taxpayers are willing to accept. And then we have to design to that plan. Right now, what they've asked us to do is identify all the needs, come up with all the scenarios, because we've looked at a lot. We didn't show you every scenario. We'd still be here talking. The two committees.
You can look at the scenario where you can put police and fire. I don't know if it's Maple or not.
Yes, I showed that. Yeah, it's one of, yeah, but one of the important things is we're not tied to anything. So if we were to do like a police and fire, and we talked about this, and that's why I thought it was important that we got you guys input here and in front of everybody, is that you could put a police and fire kind of joint station somewhere over there and still keep a police and fire presence at Lover's Corner. But I think it's a lot of what Craig was saying, and Chief Brockton is probably agreeing that you can really maximize your service to the residents.
And I think we're naive if we think that the problems in the west are not going to filter east, right? So our service demand, I think, is going to continue to grow, you know, and if we're going to grow like that, we need a better facility to accommodate our growth.
I don't disagree with you. I know you guys, I worked here for 11 years. I know you're all planning in that building. You were planning for the building when I was here. But my thought is, you know, the plans are beautiful, but I don't like Taj Mahal. I like design. You know, and I think, you know, it wouldn't, everybody wouldn't have to move out of the existing building, if we build another building farther east, and then move some of the police and fire out, and then remodel the building that we have now.
All of which is on the table, just happened to I'm on the right.
Before the stuff, we're not in this.
We're not gonna- No way.
Sam, do you want to?
I have three basic concepts in mind. And I think the first was very end. Number one, what we have is. So what in my mind, I kind of a simplifier too. What we have is that. That's not an unacceptable concept. What we have is woefully inadequate. But in fact, it's embarrassing. You know, quite frankly, when I first took office like 2 years ago, we took a tour, thanks to Mr. Williams. I was shocked at what I saw. I couldn't believe the conditions in which we're employing qualified personnel. They're not going to stay if we continue to supply them with these kinds of facilities. I wouldn't stay. I would work in Evendale or Blue Edge, the government where they have the Taj Mahal. But we don't need the Taj Mahal. We need something functional. But if we don't take steps in the direction of modifying, improving, significantly investing in this infrastructure, we're going to lose staff, and that can't happen. We're going to have unqualified people wanting to work here, and I don't think any of you here want that for your families. I want good, high quality police and fire protection, period. And I'm willing to pay for it, quite frankly. And I understand that a lot of people are not in a role or in a position where they can do that. I respect that. Well, number one, what we have, inadequate on every level. Number two, our chiefs made two very important points. Our population, our service area westwardly has increased. That's where a lot of our demand is located. To not place a significant facility there is very short-sighted. It has to happen. That's where the people are. We're gonna have growth everywhere. But that piece of this, we all have to recognize it. It's just the reality. That's where the population is. That's where these folks are going on a day-to-day basis. They're not coming, well, with the exception of the Wiggins situation, they're not coming to my name on a regular basis. Okay? So number two, that was point number two. Point number three, I'd like to see a few more specifics on the financing piece. I appreciate the three general concepts that were provided there. That's not enough for anyone to help me to, I guess, to have a good grasp of what we can actually generate in terms of funds to do these things. So my request in the next step would be, I'd like to see just a little bit more of the particulars of that. You know, what kind of funding opportunities are there? Are there any grant opportunities, whether they be federal, state, you know, whatever, local, regional, cooperative with other departments? You know, these are concepts beyond my level of expertise and understanding, but I do want to see a little bit more of the granular information on how we're going to pay for this. My guess is we're probably not going to be able, the community's probably not going to be willing to spend $25 million. I think it'd be a stretch to believe that we're going to be able to generate that kind of money. I think something a little bit more realistic would probably be in the $15-ish million range. Just my simple way of thinking. And again, we're just talking this idea. I think $27 million is pie in the sky. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay, I don't think this community is going to stomach that by and large. So I think we have to bring it down a little bit and look at something a little bit more between that 8 million and $27 million mark. And I think that's going to be kind of in the 15-ish, 17-ish million dollar range. Regardless, you know, and lastly, I'm going to shut up because Mr. Freeman wants to keep this meeting, you know, short. So I respect that. Yeah, and I apologize, but the gross, another gross reality here is that these costs are going up. Okay, and they gave us some very fine examples, regardless of whether we're 8, 15, 17, 27. The longer we wait, the more we're going to pay, the more unaffordable it's going to get, the more new code restrictions are going to be in place. It's just going to become much more complicated. So, you know, we're at the point where we're inadequate, woefully inadequate. We have a population to serve in the west end of the community. We have to serve both sides of the township. There has to be a presence here, and we can't afford $27 million. But I think we can probably float somewhere between 15 and 17, and everybody's happy. But we're going to have to come up with the money paper. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Tim, bring us home. No, I think that's it for tonight. It was just the whole idea of see what potential needs there were. And then trying to see maybe we'll go back to work and whittle that down. at this point, and I think guidance from the board in terms of the targets would be helpful, because then they got an idea, you know, if it's 30,000 square foot, it's doable as opposed to 45, then, you know, we can start planning for it. So we'll take guidance from the board at this point and keep working on it. And again, thanks to our citizen members that have been on this committee. And hopefully we'll get you something that the board can feel comfortable with moving forward.
With that, I want to entertain, adjournment.
Second, yes, second. Yeah, yeah. But
Okay, we have a motion. Yes. Yes, thank you, everybody.